Watch the Ahoy music video by Osho Marin. Ahoy! Anyway, when video games were brown.
Everybody knows that video games went through a phase of desaturated brown,
The piss filter.
yellow filters, and bloom. It is an unassailable fact for which the evidence is everywhere. The unrelentingly bleak palettes of games like Gears
Remember when games looked like games? What a good time that was.
of War, Call of Duty, and Assassin's Creed. The urine-tinged highlights
Yeah,
of
brother.
Need for Speed Most Wanted and Fallout 3. The trend was so pervasive, it even infected The Legend of Zelda. The beautifully bright colours of Wind Waker were lost, replaced with the drab hues of Twilight Princess. The most erudite video essayist adjusts their glasses and starts to read from a script. It all started with Resident Evil 4.
Maybe we go play Resident Evil. That's another option. Go play the remake of the first game. The one that what year was it that came out? I don't remember. The original game was like 96 or 7, 8, one of those years. Maybe go play Resident Evil. I don't know. I've never played Resident Evil.
But wait, hold on a minute.
Holding.
Did it? Did video games really go brown for a while? Or are we just cherry-picking examples to fit the conclusion? The discourse surrounding video games can be quite dogmatic. Certain things are accepted as truth without any real basis. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that there were no brown video games during Gen 7. I'm just pointing out that brown was not a novel invention. There were brown games.
Are you telling me that brown existed before the PS2? No! No, we invented brown in the early 2000s. It didn't exist before that.
Before. Quake was famously brown. All the World War II games of the early 2000s had drab colours.
I think the difference here is the colors here look realistic. There's not a brown filter over the game. That is the difference. This has a drab brown world, but it's a drab brown world because you're in a fucking desert. All of the people on the screen are colored in the way you would expect them to be. There is no Mexico filter over the game.
Brown. All the World War II games of the early 2000s had drab colours. So my question is, was there any measurable change? Is there some kind of objective measure we could chart so that we might witness the trend with cold, hard
2002
data?
years ago, that was the one I'm thinking of.
For instance, could we do a colour analysis over a significant portion of video games history? Now, I know what you're thinking. We're talking decades. Thousands of games, each with hours, if not hundreds of hours of gameplay. How would you analyse all that? It's impossible. So anyway, here's how I did it. The first decision was the scope of the analysis, which years to cover.
Well, the problem is, at that time, you had games like Ratchet and Clank. You had games like Jack and Daxter. You had games like Sly Cooper, right? So you had games that were bright and colorful, but there were absolutely big title games that were very brown at the time. But the PS2 had such a large library. That's the thing. The PS2 had how many games were on the PS2? How many games released on PS2? And then this did continue into early PS3 and 360. There is approximately close to 11,000 games globally. Right. A shitload? Yeah, pretty
Our
much.
key interest is Gen 7, so I wanted...
I guess it was late PS2, early PS3. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. This did start on the PS2 though. So I know he's starting from PS3 because that's where a lot of these games are from, but this definitely started on the PS2. Most Wanted released on both. Yeah, released in 2005, so it was a late PS2 title. Didn't the last game come out on PS2 when the PS4 came out? Didn't PES, like, 2018 or something come out on the PS2? Last PES game on PS2. 2014. PES 2014 released on the PS2. The reason why is the PS2 was still an incredibly popular console in places like Brazil. Most people just had not gone to the next gen yet. Because it was expensive. And it was also harder to pirate games. That was also a big deal. The PS2 was great for piracy. And if you're in an area where you can't buy, you can't buy full price games, being on a console that's easy to pirate on really was appealing.
From 2005 to 2013. But I also wanted a period surrounding this era so we could observe broader trends. 2000 to 2020 seemed reasonable to me, so that's what I went with. Game selection was trickier. I wanted a sample set that was representative of gaming in each respective year. Analysing every game is impractical, and even if we could, we'd need to weight by importance. How do we define importance? I'd say it's the games that were played the most in any given year. This is a difficult metric to obtain, but it will correlate with sales figures. For this reason, I decided to use the best-selling games from each year.
Fair enough.
This cuts down our sample set to a manageable size. It was at this point I had to decide which charts to use. There are no global charts, so I had to decide on a market. I chose the US as it's the largest. The NPD group have published yearly charts with the top 20 video games throughout the entire span of our analysis. One problem with the best-selling approach is the sheer number of sports games present.
Sports!
Madden features every single year and is often joined by NCAA, NBA, and...
I wonder how many copies Madden sells outside the United States. Like, what is the second biggest... Yeah, that's a good question. What is the second biggest purchaser of Madden? Madden sales by country. Because obviously United States is number one, because no one else gives a shit about fucking American football. Madden is popular in Australia. What the fuck? Why? I guess we don't have an AFL game that's good. US and Canada.
FIFA later on. As much as I'd like to ignore them, I kept them in the analysis. To do otherwise would be cherry picking. Worst case scenario, they'll dilute the data. So, our sample set will consist of the top 20 selling games in the US from 2000 to 2020. I excluded duplicate entries as some games charted in multiple years, and I also decided to exclude handheld games. The fixed palette of the Game Boy Color titles were outliers,
Fair.
and the 3DS threw up some issues with its dual screen. Obtaining video footage of the games was the next consideration. Ideally, I would record all the footage myself using consistent capture methods with zero alteration. But this isn't practical.
I had to play 3,000
Nearly 400 games, with an estimate of 10 hours to complete an average game, yields 4,000 hours of recording
you can do
time.
that.
That is 100 working weeks. 2 years. Too much. Luckily, there is another way.
YouTube.
There's no shortage of gameplay videos on YouTube, and some folk have kindly uploaded entire long plays of many games. There are risks. I don't know for sure if any color correction has been applied. Sometimes uploaders will add intros or watermarks. Some games don't really have long plays. MMORPGs, for instance, and sports games.
That's fair.
But
that's fair.
it's the only practical solution. I downloaded the cleanest footage I could find. Complete playthroughs were able, as much representative gameplay as possible otherwise. A little downloading later, I had thousands of hours of long plays, weighing in at around 0.5 terabyte. All I had to do now was analyze it.
Did it by hand, on paper.
The basic plan was to write a program for this. Quick and dirty. Ingest video, excrete statistics. I used FFmpeg to extract video frames, and the rest is just reading the frame data and taking the required measurements. This worked well, but extracting frames was quite slow. At least a couple of seconds for each.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think that's viable. To be fair, you don't really need every single frame. Like, the game is not going to drastically change after 30 frames. So you could probably just take 1 frame per second.
This would make sampling every frame too time-consuming to be practical. And in any case, I didn't think it was necessary. I wanted to get a cross-section of an entire long play.
Right.
All levels and environments, which could have vastly different color palettes. My initial sampling method was to take 1 frame every minute, but even this took a long time on some of the lengthier long plays, so I eventually opted for a fixed number of samples, evenly distributed throughout the video.
Okay, that's fair, actually.
This gives us coverage of the entire long play, starting from a little way into the video to an equal distance from the end. It also means the analysis will run at a consistent speed, independent of video length. Compared to extracting each frame, analyzing them was very quick. This meant that I could analyze every pixel, and we wouldn't need to worry about sampling a subset. So we iterate through each pixel and keep a count of all the metrics we were after. Perhaps the most important of these was saturation. The common consensus is that games became more desaturated, so by tracking color saturation, we should hopefully be able to illustrate this trend in data. For completeness' sake, I also logged each pixel's brightness. Dark and gritty go together, and if there's a trend towards darker games, it would be nice to see that as well. One concern I had is that brown is a desaturated color, but not all desaturated colors are brown.
Right.
So I wanted a measure of how brown a game was. I defined a range of color values that qualified as brown. A hue between 5 and 45 degrees. Too red and browns become dark reds or burgundy. Too yellow and you enter into
brown
olive
is a weird color, because brown is not... Brown, you can't display a bright brown. That's just not a thing. A bright brown is an orange. Yeah, a dark orange is brown.
Saturation I took at 20% or higher. Browns can range from full saturation to low, but too low, and I think you enter the realm of warm grey. The brightness range was 10 to 60%. Too dark and you approach black. Too bright and you've got burnt oranges and terracotta. While the marginal colours are perhaps debatable, I think these ranges centre on the heart of brown.
Technology Connections made a video on that. I feel like I've seen that.
And should give us an indication of the level of brown present in any given footage. A yellow filter is a feature often comorbid with the acclaimed brownness of games, so I wanted to track pixels that fall into this range too. For this, I took a wider hue range, 5 to 65 degrees, and saturation of at least 10%. This encapsulates oranges, yellows, browns, and everything in between, giving us a warmth metric that should pick up on a yellow or orange cast in a scene. For each of these metrics, I kept a running total and then divided that by the total number of pixels sampled to get an average for the entire frame. Once all the frames were analysed, I then took an average of all the frame metrics we measured to get an overall score.
And then we make fancy
Per game
graphs.
average, saturation, brightness, brownness, and warmth. I also wanted a good way to visualise the colour composition of each game. My initial plan was to make a density plot of hue versus saturation, so that I could present a vector scope. This sort of graph is used for monitoring color video signals. It gives an editor an at-a-glance impression of the chroma composition of a scene. It's good, but I thought a full three-dimensional plot of the HSV gamut might be better. So I made a separate plot of these values too, with the intent of writing another program to visualize them. Once I'd finalized what measurements I'd be recording, I tested everything to make sure it was working as intended.
Yeah, no, you want to run the 4,000 hours of video first before you go and test anything.
Everything was good to go. I started the analysis of the dataset.
Windows.
What followed was a week or so of number crunching and a slow accumulation of output files and graphs. As the data came in, I did the only logical thing and assembled a spreadsheet. Games, years of release, and the calculated scores for saturation, brightness, brownness, and warmth.
Fucking God.
And once everything was entered, I could then chart them and witness any trends. While I was waiting for the data, I also had the opportunity to work on my visualizer for the graphs spat out by the analyzer. The idea here was to provide a 3D visualization of the palettes used in games. The HSV color model has 3 axes. Hue, which is the pure spectral color component, saturation, which is how intense the color is, and value, which is the color's brightness. With these 3 values, we can plot them as a 3-dimensional graph.
Right.
It takes the form of a cylinder, as the hue value is circular. Blue wraps around to red via magenta, forming a continuous color wheel. We plot saturation as distance from the center of the cylinder.
You know.
True neutrals, white, gray, black, occupy the center. Fully saturated colors are at the edge. Value we plot as the vertical axis, such that the cylinder gets darker as we progress downwards. I constructed the cylinder from a series of cubes, with the size of the cube reflecting the quantity of that particular color. So I throw some vertices together in monogame, color them appropriately, and make them slowly rotate. Voila! A 3D representation of the most common colors present in the analysis. A cool, at-a-glance visualization. But best of all, it gives you guys something to look at while I start reading statistics.
Okay.
So let's start with some leaderboards, the highest and lowest scoring games according to our metrics. The least saturated game is Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, I can see that.
13.6%. None of the least saturated games are a huge surprise.
COD, what is finest hour? 2004. So was this... Which Call of Duty game was this? COD releases. Was this 3? 2? What is this? Oh, this is a spin-off game. Okay. Carbon makes a lot of fucking sense. Most Wanted also makes a lot of sense. COD 3 makes a lot of sense. And all of these makes a ton of... I'm surprised this one's here, actually.
Shooters, particularly World War II ones. Racing games, particularly Need for Speed, circa 2005, and a couple of the Tony Hawk games.
Up until Pro Street, like, going between Underground and Carbon, those, most of those games took place at night, so it makes sense.
Driving and skateboarding
I guess Most Wanted didn't, but it was also they had the piss filter.
might seem surprising at first, but there is a substantial amount of tarmac and concrete on screen that really brings the average down. Most saturated was Just Dance 3,
Also makes a lot of
77.4%. In fact, there are 4 Just Dance.
Just Dance, Guitar Hero World Tour, Cyberpunk 2077 makes sense, Doom, Kingdom Hearts! There it is. Kingdom Hearts mentioned.
Games in the top 10. Few can compete with their garish palette. Cyberpunk 2077 comes in 4th. But perhaps more surprising is 2016's Doom at number 6. Darkest overall is Resident Evil 7 at 8.8% average brightness. Other dark games.
The Incredibles? Was this game dark? Wait, Incredibles PS2. Was it? Okay. I just clicked randomly. Okay, I remember segments like this. Oh, yeah, I guess a lot of the game did take... Yeah, okay, that's actually fair. Yeah, a lot of the game took place underground. And in buildings. Okay, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, okay. Like, it had colors that stood out, but a lot of it was in dark areas. RE4 makes sense, Witcher 3, RE2, Gears makes a lot of sense, Halo makes a lot of sense, most of the game was at night or inside. Spider-Man, I don't know which Spider-Man game this is.
Games include The Witcher 3, Halo, Gears of War, and Diablo 2. Brightest overall is Wii Fit
Yep,
at 67.7%. Not the greatest surprise, as it does use a white background much of the time. Wii Play's high brightness can be similarly explained. Otherwise, it's Pokemon and Super Mario with the brightest palettes.
Also, MLB The Show. Yeah, all of this makes... All Nintendo titles, except for this and this, makes a lot of sense.
Which again, isn't a particular surprise. The least brown game is FIFA 13.
I guess because the ground... The ground is green, yes. Look at... What am I looking at? What's this?
Super Mario. The least brown game is FIFA 13
Oh, shut up.
at 0.6%.
Shut up.
Sports games in general score quite
Well, yeah, because the most of them take place on a green field. And then you just have carbon, and carbon's not the least brown because of it, because of like anything in the game. It's the least brown because the entire fucking game is just black everywhere because it's pitch dark everywhere.
quite low on the brown scale.
Let me bring some carbon gameplay. NFS carbon.
I still don't know what happened that night you took off.
Oh, the car's brown.
10-10, 4 Echo 10.
Nothing else is.
Direction of travel won't support a roadblock.
Yeah, I can see why it's not very brown. The only thing that has color is the UI in the car. So unless your car's brown. Or maybe those are brown. Maybe they're orange. Average carbon gameplay. And also Halo. Makes sense.
They tend to be majority green, with some blue for a sky and a splash of team colours. The only non-sports games are Halo Combat Evolved and Need for Speed Carbon. Both of these use a distinctly blue-tinged palette. Now, can you guess what the most brown game is?
The most brown. World at War? COD 5? Most brown. Most brown. COD 5 sticks out of my head. Conker's bad fur day. No, Conker's brightly colored, except for Conker. What else could it be besides, like, World at War? Gotta be the desert one? I don't know how much of the game that is, though.
I'll bet you can't, as I was surprised to see it.
Okay.
It's Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
Huh. I guess all of the buildings are brown, and the roads are brown, and the cars are brown. You know what? That actually... I can see that. Because, like, the colors pop in Vice City because a lot of the buildings are so drab.
A brownness score of 65.1%.
Like, there you go. That color, for example.
Vice City.
That car, for example.
A brownness score of...
That car, like, really stands out because everything is fucking brown. This car's brown. That ground is brown. That building's brown. The road is brown. And then you have this bright yellow car.
65.1%. Surely some mistake. Vice City is awash with neon hues and glorious sunsets, right? It's awash with neon hues.
Classic GTA stuff. You have a rare car, then when a rare car spawns, because it's in memory and they only have a certain number of cars that are in memory, it just keeps spawning the same car. Classic GTA stuff.
Sunsets, right? Well, the lighting is overwhelmingly warm, but the city and roads are grey. And what do you get when you add an orange cast over grey? You get a sea of wonderful brown.
Oh, I guess NBA makes sense because the basketball courts are brown, aren't they? Typically. Odyssey makes sense. Lego India. If you're gonna tell me there was an Indiana Jones, a Lego game that was brown, I would probably guess it was Indiana Jones. That makes a lot of sense. All NBA games because of the court. Doom, okay. New Vegas makes a lot of sense. OG Oblivion makes a lot of sense as well.
Other notably brown games.
I'm surprised San Andreas isn't here. Is San Andreas less brown than I remember? I guess once you leave Grove Street, like Grove Street's very brown, but I guess once you get like San Fierro and some of the other areas, it brightens up. And like the desert, right? The desert's also there as well. Maybe less. I guess there is also Las Ventura. Yeah, okay.
Are some of the basketball titles. Some courts traverse into the brown zone. And games set in arid landscapes are also up there. Assassin's Creed, Lego Indiana Jones, and Fallout New Vegas. The warmth metric mirrors the brown, which is...
warmth, Vice City, okay, makes sense. Gears 3, Diablo 2, lots of NBA. Okay, yeah. All that makes sense.
Is to be expected given the overlap. Vice City once again leads the way with a whopping 83.5% of pixels being warm-toned. Gears of War 3 jumps surprisingly high. While only moderately brown, it does feature a lot of yellow tones in its highlights. The football games are once again least warm,
sure,
with FIFA taking the lead. A few surprises to be had then.
FIFA, Madden, Halo, Madden.
But the figures seem to mesh with what we'd expect. I suppose the real question is, how do things change over time? Can we see the brownification of video games in the data? First, let's look at saturation. In broad terms, this charts how colourful games were.
This actually makes so much sense. Holy shit, this actually makes so much sense. Because here is when you're seeing a lot of like mascot platformers, a lot of like brightly colored games, and then you go towards like the start of the late PS2, early PS3, and then like everything sort of desaturates for a while, and then spikes back up. What is this, 2013 or so? I guess this is probably like I think a lot of it is like this early PS3 era that people think of when they think of brown. The Wii era, yeah. That actually would also help.
The least saturated year, at 33.5%, was 2005, due to the likes of Need for Speed Most Wanted, Tony Hawk's American Wasteland, and Midnight Club 3.
Oh, yes.
The most saturated year, 45.4%, was 2012, helped by Just Dance 4 and Skylanders Giants.
That makes... that makes a lot of sense.
Trend-wise, we start off around the 40% mark in 2000, declining until 2005. From that point on, there's a recovery, with average saturation steadily climbing throughout the 7th generation until its peak in 2012. From there, there's a recovery back down to around the 40% mark, where it holds steady for a while. There does seem to be an uptick in 2019 and 2020, although without further data, we can't say whether that continues.
Right.
On to the next metric, brightness. The darkest year on record was 2005. 22.6% average brightness. Resident Evil 4 and Splinter Cell are the darkest games from this year. The brightest year is 2008, 30.5%. Wii Fit helped a lot here.
Can we see a chart?
The overall change in brightness over
That looks like a very similar chart to me.
time is
Obviously, saturation was much higher here in 2012, but this dip looks very similar.
less pronounced than that of saturation, but we can see a dip from 2003 to 2006. This coincides with the decline in saturation we observed. Our brownness metric shows no major trends at all.
So maybe it's less brown and it's like desaturation that people mean.
The least brown year was 2001, where there is a congregation of more blue-toned games like Halo, Grand Theft Auto 3, and Metal Gear Solid 2. The brownest year was 2016, where the earthy tones of Far Cry Primal and rusty reds of Doom lift the average. But overall, things stay about the same. If anything, from 2006 to 2011, there was a steady decline in the amount of brown in games, but it's only very slight.
Granted, I don't know what the data would look like if you deleted all the sports games.
In terms of color warmth, the coolest year was the same as the least brown, 2001.
Makes sense.
The warmest colors were in 2010. The deserts of Fallout New Vegas and Red Dead Redemption probably mostly to blame. Trend-wise, we see a gradual increase of warm colors from 2002 to 2010, followed by a decline.
That makes sense because you had an increase in saturation as well.
So, let's draw some conclusions. Were video games more brown during Gen 7? They were not.
Brown, no.
There is no
but
substantial change in the amount of brown in games between 2000 and 2020. If anything, there was a slight decrease in brown in the latter half of Gen 7. This might be a reaction from developers in the face of the criticism that earlier games received. Were video games less saturated during Gen 7? This is partially true, but the decrease in game saturation can largely be attributed to games of the 6th generation instead. I'd suggest it's because the introduction of the PS2 and Xbox marked a shift in the target market for games.
Right, it moved away from like platformers and games that are like more intended for kids to these more adult, gritty experiences.
The children and adolescents of the 90s had grown up, and it was increasingly acceptable for young adults to play games. This led to an increased number of games that catered for a mature audience, and this meant a major shift to more realistic settings. The types of games people were playing changed too. Shooters, driving games, and skateboarding games were popular. These genres tend to have quite muted palettes, and so we see a marked decrease in average saturation throughout the 6th generation. By the time the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii had released, this trend was starting to reverse, however. The Wii, in particular, served as a reminder that colourful, family-friendly titles could still be successful.
Right,
again,
yeah, Nintendo had such a drop-off with the GameCube that they weren't even really a part of that generation.
The types of games people were playing changed. Market fatigue led to the downfall of World War II shooters and skateboarding games.
I wish we
and
could
the
have
games
World
that
War II
replaced
shooters
them
back.
were generally more colourful. By the end of Gen 7, games were more saturated than at any point of our analysis. Again, possibly a consequence of developer response to criticism. Were video games plagued with yellow filters during Gen 7? This is true, albeit not to the extent some would believe. There is a very slight trend upwards in the amount of yellow and orange in games, rising from 2005 to a peak in 2010. This is likely a consequence of the introduction of color grading to games. The more programmable graphics pipelines of Gen 7 hardware could more effectively use post-processing effects. Adjusting the colors of a final rendered scene according to a lookup table is a quick and effective way of imparting a desired look and feel to a game. Done well, it can make a scene look better and impart a filmic look. However, it's fair to say the technique wasn't used entirely responsibly during its infancy. Some games did suffer from an excessively yellow appearance, and this was exacerbated by the trend for desaturation. I think it just took a while for developers to get to grips with color grading. I don't recall many complaints about the rusty red filters in 2016's Doom, although this was accomplished with a similar technique. The yellow filter wasn't universal either. For every gritty shooter, there's a title like Guitar Hero or Super Mario Galaxy.
Well, yeah, when Nintendo got their act together.
I wonder if it's not the games that changed,
Kingdom
but
Hearts!
the players. If you were born in the 90s, you would have grown up with the PS2 and come of age with Gen 7. If you went from Kingdom Hearts to Gears of War, you might wonder where all the colour went. You might blame the new generation. So the Xbox 360 and PS3 are unfairly painted with this reputation.
Yes.
The truth is,
Malaria
the trend for
Simulator.
desaturated realism started years before. It was the growing pains of the PS2's shift to a more mature market that brought the gritty style to the mainstream. And this was the legacy that the Gen 7 consoles inherited. If anything, over the course of their tenure, they fixed it. By the end of the generation, games were more colourful than ever. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.
That was fun. That was very fun. I do like Ahoy's content. He doesn't upload very much because he takes 3-4 months to make a video. But even so, I like that. I can see where the brown comes from, but a lot of it I think is focusing on there's a couple of major titles every single year, right? There was definitely, if you look at the big games in that era, there was definitely a trend. Like Final Fantasy 12, for example, it was a massive shift from what you saw in 10. But obviously you did have other examples as you went through there as well.